Keanu Reeves walked into the company lobby quietly. No suit, no tie, no assistant trailing behind him. Just a worn leather jacket and old sneakers that had clearly seen better days. His hair was slightly messy, his expression calm, almost invisible. The receptionist looked up, barely acknowledging him. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked. "No," Keanu said simply. She gestured toward the hallway. "You'll have to wait there." Keanu nodded, silently moving toward the waiting area. He sat down on one of the sleek chairs, his hands folded in his lap. Around him, the lobby buzzed with activity. Phones rang. Laptops clicked. People passed, immersed in their own worlds. What no one realized was, they had just asked the owner of the company to wait like he didn't belong. The man sitting there wasn't just any visitor, he was the co-founder, the majority shareholder, the person who owned 53% of everything in this building. Yet here he was, treated like a stranger, a low-level contractor, someone who had no business being there. A few employees glanced in his direction. One whispered to another. Another pointed discreetly and laughed softly. Keanu didn't flinch. He didn't react. He sat, patient, observing every detail, the way people glanced at him, the way they judged him by what he wore, by the simplicity of his presence. No one spoke to him. No one offered water, no one smiled, no one acknowledged him at all. 7 minutes passed like hours. And yet, Keanu stayed completely composed, his eyes scanning the room, noticing everything. This wasn't about anger or confrontation. It never was. It was about truth, the truth of how people behave when they think you don't matter. And right now, the truth was staring him in the face. Keanu Reeves didn't leave. He didn't raise his voice. He simply waited. Because he knew that sometimes, the greatest power isn't in proving yourself in the moment, it's in watching, understanding, and letting the moment come to you. And that moment was about to arrive. Most people inside the building had no idea who he was. Keanu Reeves wasn't just a famous actor or a public figure they might have recognized on the street. He was the co-founder of the company they worked for. He owned the majority of it, 53% of every asset, every contract, every decision made in this office. And yet here he was, quiet, unassuming, sitting in the waiting area, blending in with the rest of the office staff. For years, Keanu had stayed away from the office. Emails were handled by assistants. Reports were read, calls returned, deals signed, all without ever stepping foot in the building. People thought the man who owned the company was a distant figure, perhaps even absent. Some probably assumed he didn't care, or worse, that he wasn't involved at all. But that morning he had decided to come unannounced. Not to show power. Not to make a statement. He came to see the truth. The truth of how people behave when they think they are in control, and when they believe the person they are dealing with doesn't matter. Executives passed by him. Some glanced at his worn sneakers and leather jacket and shook their heads with barely concealed smirks. A couple of managers whispered behind their hands. One young employee even rolled her eyes before quickly looking away. He noticed everything. Every smirk. Every judgment. Every subtle glance that tried to measure him against the office's invisible hierarchy. Inside the boardroom, the scene was different. Behind the glass walls, the executives laughed, clinked glasses, and adjusted expensive watches. Whiskey sat in delicate crystal glasses. Papers were shuffled and contracts examined. There was an air of comfort, of superiority, a sense that nothing, and no one, could disturb their carefully controlled world. Yet Keanu Reeves was there. Unannounced. Silent. Unmoved. He didn't try to blend in to be polite. He didn't announce himself to command attention. He simply observed. It was the perfect test. Because most people reveal their true selves not when they know they are being watched, but when they believe the other person doesn't matter. And right now the executives were showing their true colors. 7 minutes passed. 15 minutes. Each second revealed more: dismissiveness, arrogance, entitlement. They laughed, joked, and judged without realizing that the man they ignored had the power to change their lives forever. Keanu thought about it all. The emails he never received. The deals nearly sabotaged behind his back. The subtle betrayals of those who had been entrusted with power. And he realized one thing: this wasn't personal. It was human. People always reveal themselves when they feel untouchable. This wasn't about punishment yet. It wasn't about revenge. It was about awareness, observation, understanding. Because sometimes the first step to true authority isn't in asserting power. It's in quietly watching, understanding, and letting the arrogance of others reveal itself. And Keanu knew, the moment to act was coming. Keanu Reeves remained seated, quiet and composed, but fully aware of everything happening around him. Executives continued their casual parade past him, glancing at his worn leather jacket and faded sneakers with barely concealed judgment. One man smirked, shaking his head, clearly thinking, "Who is this guy? He doesn't belong here." Another whispered something into his colleague's ear, chuckling softly, as if the mere presence of Keanu was a joke. Behind the glass walls, the boardroom was alive with noise, laughter, clinking glasses, and the subtle hum of self-importance. Expensive watches reflected the sunlight. Whiskey swirled in crystal glasses. Contracts and documents were spread across the table, symbols of authority and wealth. And yet, no one acknowledged him. No one offered a greeting. No one even made eye contact. No water, no polite nod, not a single gesture of respect. Minutes passed and the arrogance only grew. People whispered behind their hands, judging him, scoffing at the simplicity of his appearance. They didn't know, or didn't care, that the man sitting there quietly owned the very building they occupied. They saw a jacket, sneakers, a quiet man. They didn't see power. They didn't see authority. They didn't see the truth. Keanu's gaze was steady, calm, observant. He watched a group of executives lean back in their chairs, laughing about a deal he hadn't approved yet. One of them even glanced at him, shrugged, and returned to their conversation as if he were a ghost. 7 then 10 minutes passed. He noticed the smallest details. The way the youngest employee shifted uncomfortably when their boss snickered. The subtle eye rolls, barely caught, from someone trying to assert superiority. The faint tension in a hand that had just slammed a contract down, revealing nerves beneath the bravado. Disrespect was everywhere. And it was loud even in silence. Keanu didn't rise. He didn't react. He let the arrogance and the ignorance of others fill the space. He allowed them to reveal who they truly were when they thought no one was watching. Because that's the truth about arrogance. It always exposes itself. Every laugh, every smirk, every dismissive glance, they all told a story. A story of entitlement. A story of people who believed they could control everything and everyone, including someone far more powerful than they could imagine. Keanu understood something important in that moment. This wasn't just about him. This was a test of character, for everyone in that room. And the results were clear. No one had offered kindness. No one had offered acknowledgement. No one had even recognized the value of simple human respect. Keanu didn't need to react immediately. This wasn't about instant revenge. It was about watching, observing, and letting truth surface on its own. And in that quiet observation, the first seeds of understanding began to form, for him and soon enough for them. The room remained unaware. The arrogance remained unchecked. But the tide was about to turn. Because sometimes, the people who underestimate you most are the ones who will face the consequences first. And Keanu Reeves? He was ready. Keanu Reeves stood up. Calm, measured, unhurried. Every head in the lobby seemed to lift instinctively as he walked toward the glass-walled boardroom. The executives inside, still laughing and clinking their glasses, didn't notice at first. They were too wrapped up in their sense of superiority, in their self-importance, in the belief that no one could touch them. He paused at the door. The sound of his steps against the polished floor echoed in the silent hallway beyond. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The chatter, the laughter, the confident clatter of pens on paper, all faded into an uneasy quiet. Then, with a steady hand, Keanu opened the door and stepped inside. Immediately, the room's energy shifted. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Laughter died in throats. Whiskey glasses, once held casually, now seemed fragile in trembling hands. "What are you doing here?" Someone barked, his voice sharp and defensive, trying to mask the sudden tension. Keanu said nothing. Not a word. Not a hint of anger. Not a challenge. He walked straight to the center of the boardroom, moving with a quiet authority that demanded attention without needing to speak. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small card. The room collectively leaned forward, curiosity replacing arrogance. Slowly, deliberately, he placed the card on the table. Instantly, the room went silent. Faces shifted. Smiles disappeared. Eyes widened. The room, once brimming with self-confidence, now held an undercurrent of fear and uncertainty. No one dared speak. No one dared ask. No one dared make a joke. Keanu's gaze swept across the table. Every executive who had laughed at him, judged him, dismissed him, they were caught in a moment of realization. They understood, in that instant, the gravity of the situation. It wasn't the card that shocked them, it was the authority behind it. The silent power in the man who had just been ignored. The quiet dominance of someone who didn't need to raise his voice to command respect. The card held a simple message. It confirmed his ownership, his control, and his oversight. Every project, every deal, every decision in this room was now squarely under his authority. The executives had laughed, sneered, and dismissed him, but the truth was clear: they had been fools. The tension in the room was palpable. One by one, the employees who had once whispered and judged now shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some pressed their hands against the table as if to ground themselves. A few swallowed hard, glancing nervously at their colleagues, wondering if they had underestimated the man sitting before them. And in that moment, a harsh lesson became evident. Arrogance, when left unchecked, always exposes itself. Disrespect, when aimed at someone who holds true authority, is the first step toward downfall. Keanu didn't need to yell, didn't need to threaten. He simply stood there, letting the weight of reality sink in. The room that had once been alive with laughter now vibrated with an unspoken acknowledgement. They had misjudged him. For the first time that morning, the executives truly saw him. Not as a quiet man in worn sneakers, not as someone who might be ignored, but as the person who had the power to shape their lives, careers, and the very company they had treated with disdain. And even in this quiet, calculated reveal, Keanu was already thinking ahead. This moment, though powerful, was only the beginning. He hadn't come here for revenge. He had come to uncover truth, to witness character, to test humanity in those who believe themselves untouchable. Every judgment, every smirk, every dismissive glance had been catalogued in his mind. And now, with the room's energy shifted and the truth revealed, he was ready to act. The executives sat frozen. Their arrogance dissolved into unease, their confidence replaced by the sudden, undeniable weight of reality. Keanu Reeves had entered the boardroom unnoticed. He was silent, invisible. And now he had made them all see the truth. And what came next would change everything. Before anyone in the boardroom could recover from the shock of Keanu Reeves' silent reveal, the door swung open again. A young employee stepped in, clutching a stack of files, his hands trembling. His face was pale, his voice shaky. They were planning to sell the company, he stammered, his eyes darting nervously from one executive to the next. The room went even quieter than before. Conversations had already died, but now a heavier, darker tension settled over the boardroom like a storm cloud. Keanu's eyes didn't leave the young employee, calm and patient, letting him speak. Secret deals. Hidden transfers. Hundreds of jobs on the line. Entire departments in danger. The people who had been laughing, joking, and dismissing him just minutes ago were suddenly facing the consequences of their arrogance and deceit. Whispers started in corners of the room. Nervous glances between colleagues. Hands fidgeted, papers rustled, but no one dared speak loudly. Every eye was on Keanu, waiting for a reaction, wondering what he would do next. The executives had been so consumed by their own self-importance that they had failed to notice what was happening behind closed doors. They hadn't realized that under their carefully polished veneer, there were hidden agendas. Secret agreements. Plans to betray the very company they claimed to serve. Keanu had come not just to witness disrespect, but to uncover the truth about character. And the truth was laid bare in front of him, in black and white. Documents revealing their betrayal, files detailing clandestine deals, spreadsheets showing the silent dismantling of the company they were entrusted to protect. And now, standing in the center of the room, he held the ultimate power, knowledge. Some executives swallowed hard. Others shifted in their seats uncomfortably. A few turned pale. The arrogance and laughter that had filled the room moments ago were gone. They had been replaced by fear. Fear of the consequences. Fear of losing everything. Keanu didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. The silence in the room carried more weight than any words could. This wasn't about punishment yet. This wasn't about vengeance. This was about accountability. This was about the moment when arrogance, disrespect, and deceit collide with reality, and the truth becomes unavoidable. He looked at each of them, his gaze steady, unflinching, and unwavering. They had seen him as nothing. They had treated him as invisible. And yet, here he was, calm, in control, aware of every lie, every betrayal, every hidden plan. And now, the power that they had ignored, and the respect they had refused, was in his hands. The young employee stepped back, terrified but relieved that the truth was finally out. Files clutched to his chest, he could only watch as Keanu surveyed the room. The executives who had thought themselves untouchable were now completely exposed. It was a defining moment. Not just for the company but for every person in that room. Every misstep, every act of arrogance, every moment of dismissiveness had been catalogued. And now the consequences were clear. Keanu finally broke the silence. his voice calm, precise, and controlled. "I didn't come here to be recognized. I didn't come here to show power. I came here to see how you treat people you think don't matter, and to see if you can be trusted when no one is watching." The words hung in the air like a verdict. Every executive froze. Their plans, their arrogance, their sense of control, all crumbling under the weight of accountability. "You have failed," he continued. "Not just in loyalty, not just in judgment, but in basic human decency. And for that," he paused, letting the tension stretch, "you will face the consequences." Keanu's calm authority, combined with the undeniable truth now laid bare, created a room full of silence, fear, and disbelief. This wasn't just about disrespect anymore. This wasn't just about arrogance. This was about hidden truths coming to light, and the reckoning that follows when people forget integrity matters more than self-interest. And the executives, once confident, arrogant, untouchable, were finally forced to confront the reality. Their actions, their deception, their disregard for others had led them to this very moment. Keanu Reeves had walked in unnoticed. He had sat quietly, observed silently, and now the bigger truth was revealed. The people who had disrespected him, ignored him, and betrayed the company were powerless in his presence. And the next step would decide their fate. Keanu Reeves stood in the center of the boardroom, silent, calm, and unshakable. The room, once alive with laughter, clinking glasses, and casual arrogance, now held only fear. Every executive sat frozen, every employee glanced nervously around, and the young worker who had exposed the secret deals pressed the files tightly to his chest, unsure what would happen next. Keanu's eyes scanned the room. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to gesture dramatically. Every detail, the tremble in a hand, the way someone's foot tapped anxiously, the subtle shifting of chairs, told him everything he needed to know. "I didn't come here to be recognized," he said finally, his voice steady and clear, cutting through the tension like a blade. "I didn't come here to assert power. I came here to see how you treat people you think don't matter." The words hit like a hammer. For a moment, no one breathed. Some executives exchanged glances, hoping someone else would respond, that someone else would defuse the situation. But Keanu didn't flinch. He didn't move. He waited, allowing the silence to stretch, allowing the weight of truth to settle over everyone in the room. "You've shown your character," he continued. "Not through your titles. Not through your suits. Not through your deals or contracts. But through your behavior when you thought no one important was watching." The room remained silent. Fear mingled with shame. Some executives stared at the floor, others at the windows as if escape might be found there. None dared meet his gaze directly. Keanu paused, letting the moment linger. Every second drew out the tension. Every second made the executives realize the magnitude of their misjudgment. They had been arrogant. They had ignored him. They had treated him as invisible. And now the consequences were coming. "You are all terminated. Effective immediately." The words dropped like a thunderclap. Shock rippled through the room. A few executives gasped. Some tried to speak, but their voices faltered. The calm authority in Keanu's tone left no room for argument. Security, previously standing discreetly near the door, stepped forward. Their presence was subtle but firm, a reminder that authority had shifted completely. Within seconds, the executives who had once laughed and plotted were escorted out of the room. Their power had vanished in an instant, stripped away not by violence or anger, but by the undeniable truth of accountability. Keanu turned back to the remaining employees. His expression softened, though his eyes still held the weight of authority. "This company will not tolerate arrogance, betrayal, or disrespect," he said. "Not toward me, not toward each other, and not toward anyone who works here. Character is shown in how you treat those you believe hold no power." Whispers of relief spread among the employees. Some exhaled deeply, others exchanged glances, realizing that fairness and integrity had finally prevailed. Keanu's decision was decisive, but not vindictive. It was about restoring balance, about showing that true authority comes from integrity, not fear or hierarchy. "You have a choice," he said, addressing the remaining employees. "You can either contribute to a culture of respect and honesty, or you can leave. This company is not a place for arrogance or entitlement. It is a place for people who understand that every action matters, and that respect is not optional." Some employees nodded. Others simply listened, absorbing the gravity of the moment. They realized that Keanu had observed more than disrespect. He had seen potential, courage, and loyalty as well. The young employee who had brought the files stepped forward, relieved but still anxious. Keanu nodded at him, a subtle gesture of acknowledgement. The files, once a symbol of deception, were now a symbol of truth, and Keanu had used them to restore order and integrity to the company. This was the moment that would change the company forever. Not through fear, not through intimidation, not through anger, but through calm, unwavering, decisive leadership. The executives had been exposed. The employees had learned a lesson in respect and accountability. And Keanu Reeves? He had demonstrated that true power is quiet, deliberate, and based on character, not appearance. In the end, it wasn't about punishment alone. It was about making a statement. Arrogance and disrespect have consequences. Integrity and awareness matter more than status or title. And those who underestimate others often pay the highest price. The boardroom, once filled with laughter and false confidence, now held a new energy, one of respect, caution, and understanding. The decision had been made. The lesson delivered. And the company would never forget it. After the last executive was escorted out, the boardroom felt different. The air, once thick with arrogance, entitlement, and deception, was now heavy with relief, tension, and the quiet hum of realization. Employees who had once whispered behind hands, judged colleagues, or ignored those around them now sat in stunned silence, processing what had just happened. Keanu Reeves remained standing in the center of the room. Composed. Unshakable. His presence alone seemed to shift the energy of the space, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the weight of authority he carried, not through words but through integrity, observation, and decisive action. He surveyed the room. Not a single person looked untouched by the moment. Some eyes were wide, stunned by the swift downfall of those who had thought themselves untouchable. Others glistened, tears threatening to fall, not from sadness but from relief. Relief that justice, true justice, not fear-driven punishment, had finally prevailed. Keanu spoke, his voice soft yet commanding, every word deliberate. Your jobs are safe. The phrase, simple as it was, carried immense weight. A wave of exhalation swept through the room. Shoulders relaxed. Tension melted, replaced with gratitude. The employees, who had feared that they too might be punished or swept away by the chaos, now understood something crucial. This wasn't about fear, this wasn't about vengeance, and it certainly wasn't about appearances. This company, Keanu continued, will never judge people by the clothes you wear, the titles you hold, or the power you think you see. Real character is shown in how you treat people you believe have no influence, no authority, no importance. A silence followed, but it was no longer tense. It was reflective. The employees listened, absorbing the lesson that had been quietly embedded in every interaction, every observation, and every decision Keanu had made. He walked slowly through the room, acknowledging those who had acted with honesty, courage, and integrity. His eyes met each employee's, conveying trust and appreciation without a single flourish or show of theatrics. In that quiet acknowledgement, the employees felt seen, validated, and understood. They realized that respect is not given based on hierarchy or fear. It is earned through consistent, fair, and human behavior. For those who had faltered, who had allowed arrogance or entitlement to cloud their judgment, the consequences had already spoken. Their absence in the room was a reminder that no one is immune when integrity is ignored. Keanu took a deep breath, letting the moment settle. The lesson he had delivered was more than corporate. It was human. It was about awareness, accountability, and the simple, yet profound truth that how we treat those around us, especially those we think are powerless, defines us. This isn't about weakness or strength, he said. I was ignored not because I was weak. I was ignored because others were arrogant. And arrogance always reveals itself. The employees nodded, understanding dawning on their faces. The lessons of the morning were now theirs to carry forward. Every interaction, every choice, every moment of judgment or kindness mattered. Keanu's final words were deliberate, a clear message that would echo long after he left the room. From today forward, this company will operate differently. Respect will not be conditional. Integrity will not be optional. And arrogance will never go unnoticed. There was a collective understanding in the room. The fear that had once gripped them was now transformed into purpose, reflection, and determination. They had witnessed firsthand the consequences of disrespect, the power of quiet observation, and the authority that comes from integrity rather than intimidation. For Keanu, the day had not been about punishment alone. It had been about teaching, guiding, and reshaping the environment so that respect, fairness, and character would be the cornerstones of the company going forward. He looked around one last time, a faint smile brushing his lips, not of triumph but of quiet satisfaction. The lesson was delivered. The truth revealed. And the company, as a result, was stronger, fairer, and wiser. The employees slowly began to speak among themselves, cautiously at first, sharing relief and understanding. They now understood that true leadership isn't measured by titles or fear, but by awareness, observation, and the courage to act with integrity. Keanu Reeves had entered a room where he was underestimated and ignored. He had observed. He had revealed the truth. He had taken decisive action. And in the end, he left the room not as someone to fear, but as someone to respect. The message was clear and unforgettable. Respect should be unconditional. Arrogance and entitlement have consequences. True character is revealed in the small, quiet moments, especially when no one else is watching. And as the employees exited the room, the atmosphere had shifted completely. A culture of accountability, fairness, and integrity had been established, not by fear, not by threat, but by the calm, deliberate, and unwavering actions of someone who understood that true power lies in respect, not appearances. The day's events would be remembered, not for the humiliation of a few, but for the lesson that transformed a company and its people forever. Keanu Reeves had not only revealed the truth, he had set a standard. And that standard would guide the company for years to come.